So what's the worst thing about successfully selling a business?
So it's interesting. For some people, their whole life is tied up, like their identity is tied up in their business, but not every entrepreneur operates that way. I read The E-Myth early on by Michael Gerber, The E-Myth Revisited. And in The E-Myth, they talk about, think about your business as totally separate from yourself. And that really resonated with me. So I probably read The E-Myth in 1997, and I didn't sell until 2012. But that mindset kind of persisted the whole way for me. So for me, it wasn't like I lost my identity when I sold the company. But what happens is you end up, if you have a good, outcome and you get the, capital you need out of it, you have this big pile of capital that came out of the business. And so you feel at one side of the equation wealthy or like you've created a lot of capital, wealth, whatever you want to call it. But then on the other side of the equation, all your cash flow is gone.
Yeah.
So, interesting little things too go away. Like for me, my CFO managed a lot of my personal finance stuff. Well, that was gone. I had an executive assistant, that was gone. Like all these sort of like businesses evolve, I think, for entrepreneurs to kind of like really help them in all parts of their life. And you lose all of that like almost overnight. So that was, and it was funny, I had a buddy of mine who had sold his company like probably 2 years before. And he said to me, he goes, and I'm sure you have it in Europe too, but in the United States, when you drive by a gas station, you can see what the prices are for gas. And, when you reach a certain point of, you just don't pay attention to that. You pull in, you get gas, and you go. And his name was Tim Danley. Tim said to me, he goes, just watch, you're going to start to notice when the price of gas changes. And I looked at him, I was like, Tim, you're out of your mind. Like, there's no chance. Sure enough, like 9 months post transaction, I'm like, oh, it's $4 a gallon now for gas. Like, the strangest things start to like creep in, and you all of a sudden, like at one point feel really abundant, but on the other side, because the cash flow went away, there's like almost a scarcity mindset. And if you've lived in an abundant mindset for a really long time, to switch into scarcity is really unsettling. And that was one for sure. I would say, just what are you going to wake up and do tomorrow, right? And I stayed on for about 7 months. We all decided that was a bad idea. And I moved on from the company that acquired mine. And then, it's the next day and you wake up and you have the paradox of unlimited choice, which sounds great. But it's like going to the grocery store. There used to be 3 kinds of toothpaste. Now there's 300 kinds of toothpaste. It's harder to make a decision. Same thing, like post exit, you wake up, you could do 1,000 different things, but having 1,000 options sometimes can be overwhelming. Yeah. So kind of losing connection to those, like this is my routine. All of a sudden your routine goes away.
Yeah. Could you name 1 or 2 other things that are,
Yeah, I have, and these are so tactical, but I think they're so important. So, and it's advice that I give to anyone that's contemplating an exit. It's going to sound like ridiculous, but most entrepreneurs, I started in the 90s when email was just becoming a thing, but even now, most entrepreneurs use their business email address as their primary email address. Yeah. And all of a sudden, when you sell your company, you sell your domains, you sell your web presence, you sell your email servers, you sell everything. Now all of a sudden, your primary email, somebody else has access to. And in my case, I was 100% sure that the company that acquired me, they were reading my private email. And I actually, and it's kind of a funny story, but we sent an email very specifically that was not remotely true, just to see if someone was reading my email and brought up what I mentioned in this very untrue. Sure enough, 2 days later, they asked me a question that totally told me that they were reading my email. So seems really insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but the advice is, if you're an entrepreneur, have a private email address, and anything you do that is outside the company should be in that private email.
How did you cope with that?
You know, at first it feels like a massive violation, but then you go back to the point, and I've probably said this a million times, that they paid for the right to own my email address. They paid for the right to own my domains and to own my IP and to own all the things. And you just reconcile the fact that that's how transactions go. But there wasn't, there was a couple months of some resentment and some other things. So, but.
Can you name something else that was tough?
What else was hard post-transaction? I think, we were a company built on culture and core values, and we sold to a publicly traded company, and they paid lip service to culture and core values, but they didn't really understand it. And we had driven our turnover from about 115, 120% down to like 20%. And and we sold for a strategic multiple, close to 15 times EBITDA. And they paid a strategic multiple because we had really good employee retention. We had a great culture. We were really good at a handful of things, but because they were public and because they had their own methodologies and way of doing things, they inadvertently and kind of advertently undid a lot of our culture initiatives, and turnover went from this, and this is why they let me go after 7 months, because I was waving the flag like, you guys are screwing this up. And if you continue down this path, you're going to have a mutiny. Sure enough, I left in October, and by January of 3 months later, they had lost about 80% of the staff. And that was really hard to watch. You know, people that I cared deeply about, and from the executive team all the way to the front line, like I felt responsible. We had 650 employees. I felt responsible for those lives and their families and their, the communities they supported. And to watch that all unravel in less than a year, that was probably the hardest part of all of it. And to this day, I mean, I sold, over a decade ago. I'll run into old friends, employees on the street, and they all say the same thing, like, God, I miss how it used to be. It was so good and such a fun place to be. And very few of them are still there. And that was hard to watch.
Did you feel guilty?
Very guilty, yeah. And again, it was one of those, like, I did everything I could. I had a recurring nightmare, actually, and I still have it to this day, that I was standing on a mountaintop and I'm kind of watching, and there's like danger, and I know the solution to solve the danger, and I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, but I can't get any sound to come out. So I don't know where you fall on chakras and everything, but my throat chakra was totally blocked, and I literally just lost my voice. Figuratively and in the dream, literally, and that was, I still to this day have that pop up now and then.
Do you see other entrepreneurs having guilt when they sold their company?
Yeah, I think there's always a balance between, and a lot of entrepreneurs now sell to private equity, and they stay on, and those are the ones that I think are the most racked with guilt, because they're in it every day. And they're not only battling all the emotional stuff that goes with selling the company, but they're also watching, their life's work sometimes get undone. And we have lots of entrepreneurs that we counsel around that side of it.
When would you advise against selling a company?
So it's really interesting, I think, and you look at the cash flow of a business. And then you look at the basically wealth creation, the capital that comes out of a sale, and the cash flow goes away. I could make the argument that you have to sell a company for 20 or 25 times EBITDA, get all of it after tax invested at a 6, 7, 8% return, just to get back to where you were on the cash flow side. So if you're running a company or own a company and you're relying on that cash flow for your day-to-day life and lifestyle and all the things, it looks great on paper to sell it for 6 or 7 times EBITDA, but you will have a cash crisis very quickly after if you were taking most of the cash.
That's
Yeah.
It's funny, I heard somebody say, I don't think it was you, I think it's somebody else, but he said, and he also exited his business, and he said everybody who has a cash flow business wants an exit, and everybody who had an exit wants a cash flow business.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And one of the things that now when we advise entrepreneurs on the full circle of their, experience, startup, scale up, contemplate exit, post exit, one of the things you can do in that scale up phase when you've started to achieve some level of success is start to invest in passive income streams to replace, and you're not going to touch them until you exit. Like if I could go back and do a couple things differently, one of the things that I would have done is take a little bit less cash out of the business, invest in, and I don't know if it's real estate or you have to choose. I'm not an investment advisor, obviously, but passive income that at least comes close to approximating what you're taking out of the business, with the idea that once you get your passive income streams to where you want them to be from a lifestyle standpoint, then and kind of only then should you contemplate selling the mothership, the primary generator of cash. But it's so easy when things are going great, EBITDA's through the roof, and you're flying on private jets, you're spending a bunch of money, you're buying houses, you're doing all these things, and then you sell the company. Now you have all that expense from that lifestyle that you created, and you don't have the cash flow to support it. So
basically, you sort of want to be financially free already whenever you're exiting. That would be ideal.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times what happens is, like when you get really good at something and you do it for a long period of time and you're successful at it, we're entrepreneurs. We like to build stuff. It's boring. Right? A lot of exits, I think, are not even about the wealth creation. They're about, I want to do something else. I hear that all the time.
They're tired.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, all of your pattern recognition, all of your knowledge, all of your wisdom is in this niche that's boring the hell out of you. So you exit it, and then you think, well, I just exited for this massive number. I have the Midas touch. I can turn anything into gold. And you start doing dumb stuff. You're investing in like small investments in private, like, I can help those guys, I can fix that, I can turn that around. Now you've got all these diverse investments, you're all over the place, you're not really adding value anywhere, your cash flow is gone, and you're not good at the new niche that you're in because you don't recognize any of the patterns. So I think the biggest piece of that is if you're bored, stick with it. Use the engine to create these passive income streams, but don't exit it just because you're bored. That is the last reason to sell a company. I'm bored and I want to do something else. That's a recipe for disaster in most cases.
If you could go back, what would you have done differently?
In terms of
during the exit or after or before?
Yeah, I would have set up a family office. So I would have had a finance resource. I would have had an admin resource. I would have been more thoughtful about estate planning and trusts and all those things, so that's the other interesting thing that happens. You end up contemplating an exit and all the advisors in the world come out of the woodwork. And now you're sitting, I was 2 months away from the biggest transaction of my life. I'll never forget it. I'm sitting with 5 attorneys that are estate planners, and I'm literally contemplating questions like, okay, you die, and your wife remarries, and he's not really a good guy, how did you protect your assets? And then the next question, okay, you die, and your kids inherited all this money, and your middle child is a drug addict, how are you gonna handle that? And then in every scenario, it starts with you die, and then something bad happens. And you're 2 months away from contemplating an exit or going through the exit. You don't wanna answer those questions. So getting all that kind of in order ahead of time, I really feel like 24 to 48 months is about the right amount of time to plan personally, professionally, family-wise, everything for your exit. And a lot of times it's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and you're totally behind the 8 ball.
I think also you can get anxiety, for example, when you get a big sum of money and then you invest it. So for example, if you invest 50 million into S&P 500 and S&P 500 has a bad day, you can lose millions of dollars.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's why I think it's very healthy to become partially financial free already before exiting.
Yes.
And already
Cash flow, because even the S&P,
Yeah.
right? Unless you're in dividends stocks, you're not even taking cash out. But if I could go back on the investing side, I would have taken the bulk of, well, knowing what I know now, I would have bought Bitcoin, because Bitcoin when I sold was at $25. But other than that, I would have taken most of the capital, put it in the S&P, and then used that asset. If I needed cash, you can borrow against that asset. That would be the one. Had I done that, I think my financial picture today would be drastically better, different, but better, which is silly to say, but yeah, that would have been a strategy that I would have employed.
Any last thoughts on what's hard whenever you're exiting or planning to exit or post-exit?
I think, well, what's really hard are the run-up to the exit. Like, you know, my running joke, so I do M&A advisory work. I've probably led, I don't know, 30 or 40 transactions and assisted on, you know, hundreds more. But my running joke is I'm 80% psychologist and 20% M&A advisor. And in every deal I've ever worked on, every deal I've ever heard about, talked about, it's a roller coaster. It's an up and down, up and down. And you really have to kind of prepare yourself for the psychology of going through a process. And sophisticated buyers are really good at manipulating your emotions in a process. Like if they know that you've got anxiety around certain things or whatever, and it's almost become especially in private equity, they've gotten incredibly good at almost psychologically sort of manipulating entrepreneurs into that roller coaster of ups and downs, so that they're so exhausted by the end that they've given up all their leverage. They've already, in their mind, the transaction's already happened, and all of a sudden they're at a total disadvantage.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's part of your purpose to protect entrepreneurs from?
1,000%. I wake up every day, and I was lucky. I had great advisors early on. I had some good mentors. I read the right things at the right time. I met the right people at the right time. I had a great exit. And I watched so many entrepreneurs get taken advantage of. You put 10, 20, 30 years of your life into creating this thing, and someone comes along and manipulates you into basically giving it away or selling it for wildly less than it's worth. That to me is a tragedy. And we hear all the stories. I mean, literally entrepreneurs committing suicide because they realize that they gave away this, like, their most precious asset minus their family. So I wake up every day in service to that idea that I want to help. If I could help one entrepreneur avoid those pitfalls, then it's a successful day for me.